Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is Black Site for Delta Green the role-playing game by Octrium Publishing. In this video I'll be covering the 6th scenario in the book, Hourglass. Okay, first a bit of history. Released in 2020, Hourglass was not part of any of the Delta Green Kickstarters and is available as a 30-page print-on-demand and PDF. There'll be spoilers from this point on, so stop watching now if you intend to play this. Our scenario begins with a section called Briefing. It talks about an internet video that has already, at this point, gone viral. It shows a middle-aged, dark-haired, harried-looking woman standing on a park bench crying and shouting at a group of confused people. She is saying that they live in a place that does terrible things and accept their part in that community. She says that they take its money and it takes their women and children, and then she suddenly begins screaming in agony and vanishes. The crowd back away in terror and the man holding the phone exclaims in confusion, and then the video ends. The agents have been called to a secure meeting room in the FBI offices in Portland, Oregon. It's 10 AM on a Thursday and their case officer turns off the video screen. If this scenario features the outlaws, then this information is received by an encrypted thumb drive that is couriered to them. The video was recorded 4 days earlier at 1:13 PM and the case officer explains that there's no indication that special effects have been used. The program, if they're being used, are already doctoring the original footage to make it look fake and spreading disinformation, establishing a hoax narrative. It went online 86 hours ago, went viral 37 hours ago, and came to the attention of Delta Green 33 hours ago. It was posted by the boy holding the phone, a 17-year-old would-be internet star going by the moniker Raw Dog. His actual name is Herbert Roderick Salisbury. Their briefing also contains his address. The vanishing woman in the video is Terry Santos, formerly Terry Harding, formerly Terry Wilkins, a resident of a religious compound outside Hourglass, Oregon. She moved to Hourglass around 10 years ago when her then-husband got a sawmill job. 5 years ago he died in a barroom brawl, and 4 years ago their 8-year-old son died of leukemia. 2 years ago she moved into the religious commune of the Church of the 12 Martyrs, and a year ago married another resident, Robert Santos. She has minimal social presence, especially in the last 2 years. The agents will receive a dossier on Terry Santos and have the following mission: find out what happened in the video, stop the incursion, save lives, establish a mundane narrative to explain everything away and protect Delta Green from exposure. It then moves to the background. Terry Santos died due to a magical ritual that was cast by a worshipper of the Great Old Ones, a centuries-old survivor of reincarnation and unnatural life extension, a Samuel Woodman, an evil and ancient cultist currently contained within the body of Jake Elliott, a 12-year-old boy. Woodman serves the Church of the 12 Martyrs, which is in itself led by a more powerful cultist, Giles Root, currently in the body of Errol Salzo III. Errol is the third-generation heir to the church, and his followers call him the Host, due to him incarnating spirits lifetime after lifetime, a part of the heavenly host, the Sabaoth, the army of heaven that serves the throne of God. He assumed this mantle 16 years ago when the prior host, Errol Salzo Jr., died of a heart attack, and Errol Salzo, his father, 25 years before him, had died of a stroke. Errol Salzo III had 2 younger brothers, Silas, who died from suicide 19 years previously, and David, who died in a car accident 17 years ago. Errol Salzo III had actually murdered them to stop them from betraying the church, and there is no evidence linking him to the murders. Errol Salzo III never married or had children, and his mother, Rhea Salzo, manages the business of the church. The host, Giles Root, is the leader of an old group of sorcerers called the Sons of Serenos, and he has possessed the bodies of descendant after descendant for the last 200 years. The Sons of Serenos began in 17th century New England as a group of warlocks dedicated to alchemy and sorcery. Initially, they hid amongst Puritans, but drifted away when the witch trials began. They occasionally met in caves in Maine to conduct hideous rituals to Shub-Niggurath with a clutch of Shoggoths. These rites earned them a long life, but not true immortality. An ally from Innsmouth found the secret in the Necronomicon itself, a way to transfer the life and consciousness from one brain to another, but that ally was murdered and the sons wandered for around 20 years to seek a new place for their rituals. In 1948 they found hills that rose wild with woods and rivers in Hourglass, Oregon. The Takelma tribe had an ancient spirit that they despised called the Great Bat, though they were driven away from the land in the 19th century. The white settlers knew nothing of the Great Bat, but the legend lingered. Root went to work with a landowner, Errol Salzo, and explored the area for forgotten vaults in which to meet. He used his magic to suborn Salzo's mind and body and possessed him permanently. Above the caverns of the Great Bat, Salzo built a church and compound where they could live. The other sons of Serenos gathered in the vault of the Bat and prayed to Shub-Niggurath. On Hallowmas Sabbath, the son of Root, who is a half-Shoggoth, Silent Root, joined the sons from the depths. The sorcerers imbued their essences into magical candles, which enabled them to enter long-term hosts and return to the candles when they were bored. Root, in the body of Salzo, founded the Church of the 12 Martyrs. Silent Root assumed a form that looks like a black meteorite, and this was named the Ark of Sabaoth and called holy. Decades have passed and the church has thrived. Those seeking answers and solace came, strong-willed fled, and the weak remained. Today, Root reigns the son of Serenos in the body of Errol Salzo III. Two other sons live in the bodies of two other young men, born to Salzo, and the women who worship him. Silence is silent. They've grown complacent. Terry Santos's outburst caused the sons to have to silence her, and this has drawn the attention of Delta Green. After this, we move on to Hourglass itself. It gives us a map of the relevant parts of the area and informs us that it has a population of 31,253. It is rural and insular, surrounded by forests and hills, and the origin of its name has been lost to time. The lumber industry here declined in the 1970s, though most of its economy is driven by outdoor tourism such as hiking, fishing and rafting. The legalisation of cannabis in the state has had local investors planning to grow it, though this has been slow to come. Hourglass has a mayor and 8-seat council, with a city manager that oversees normal day-to-day operations. Mayor Stephen Polk considers the church to be harmless, eccentric and staunchly conservative, which is something important for his election. He considers the Terry Santos video to be a hoax, believing that she had a nervous breakdown and ran away. The agents need to be careful around Polk, as he may start asking questions as to why they find the church so interesting. The rest of the community leaders in the town are generally of the same opinion. Really devout Catholic or evangelicals regard the church with a degree of suspicion due to their secrecy. The church does, however, bring in a significant amount of money from donors worldwide. They consider federal investigation to be just that bit too invasive. The police of Hourglass has 27 officers, with 8 of them being part of a SWAT team. The police chief, Colin Hughes, has deep scepticism about the agents present in Hourglass and also considers the video to be a fake. It will tell the agents to tread carefully, as the last thing he wants is a disturbance in his town. Some of the police are keeping an unofficial watch on witnesses to Santos's disappearance and the agents. The next part discusses investigating the victim. As previously mentioned, Terry Santos lived in the compound for 23 months before the video appeared. She married Robert Santos 11 months ago. Robert Santos's address can be found by searching government records. He has no phone or social media presence, just a landline inside his house at the church, which he rarely leaves. He works there as a volunteer for room and board. Should the agents deal with Santos in a careful, understanding manner, they may be able to interview him at the compound. Should this happen, he will confess that he's not seen his wife for a few days, though he seems disinterested in her as he explains she has failed the church, which means he is also betrayed, and that he could not tolerate her failures. If pushed on this with the usual skills, he will explain that he was not the true father of the child she lost. The host was. He will explain that the host is the father to every child born at the compound, and that it is the will of God. He will say that the women marry their husbands in law, but the host in the flesh, and the martyrs in spirit. If they speak to him via telephone, they won't get as much out of him, as he will say that the child Terry conceived with him was a girl, not a boy, as the host's scriptures demand, and that she miscarried so that God could take the girl back to make room for a boy. Terry's friends and family have gradually lost touch with her over the years, with only Kenneth Collins, an uncle, Tiffany Fritch, a cousin, Stephanie Vanderhoof, a childhood friend, and Alice Padilla, a co-worker from a few jobs ago, remaining in contact, though it has been a few months. Should the agents manage to speak to them, they can find out that Terry's first husband was an abuser who is dead, and that Terry was always in the search of some kind of meaning to everything, who read copious amounts of books on spiritualism and shifted from one fad to another. They can discover that not long after her son died, she met Ria Salzo, a member of the church, and they became friends. Padilla and Vanderhoof will note that things took a turn for the worst when she joined the church, as she told them that they preferred to influence men and boys in order to guide them to righteous leadership. A few months after joining the church, she stopped communicating with outsiders entirely. Padilla can give a more detailed insight into her suspicions about the church. These can be drawn out by using various psychological skills, and they could ultimately find out that she suspects the church of brainwashing its members with mind games and physical abuse. There were times she tried to convince Terry to leave, but visits from members of the church soon closed this avenue. She said that people were there by choice and that she felt threatened by them even though the threats were never explicit. She will mention a boy of 10 to 11 years old who accompanied the adults who had eyes that she said were akin to looking into an abyss, and she was terrified but can't explain why. Should the agents pursue FBI contacts to try to get facial recognition from the video, they will have Terry Santos identified, as well as a number of other local people. A few other people saw up close what happened, but have convinced themselves that it was some sort of magic trick. Eventually, all paths should lead to Herbert Roderick Salisbury, or Raw Dog as he's known. On his video comments, he can be seen to be responding to viewers with a good-natured back and forth. However, 3 days after it was posted, his comments went silent. If the agents follow him up, they can find him living with his parent, having set up a makeshift recording studio in the basement. Raw Dog will explain that he has aspirations of becoming an online influencer, and also claims that he didn't upload the video to the web and that someone must have hacked his account. A human role will determine that he is obviously lying, and that he's trying to convince himself that what he saw wasn't real. If confronted, he will admit the truth, that at first he loved the attention the video brought him, and that a few days later 2 local police officers paid him a visit and pressed him on the hoax video and on the damage it would cause to the Church of the 12 Martyrs, warning him to take it down without actually threatening him, although Raw Dog claims that this was implied. He is terrified of the influence of the Church, and he remembers exactly what happened to Santos. There was no trickery, just something impossible that happened, and he is now scared for his family. The next section goes into the local legends that surround the Hourglass region. It's long been a hotbed for things like UFO abduction claims and Bigfoot sightings, and this can all be discovered in a few hours with an occult role. Agents with the right skills can discover an interesting passage in Rogue River Adventures, published in 1948, which mentions a legendary creature called the Great Bat. It includes a quote from an ancient woodsman called Giles Root, who mentions the Takelma people. If they talk to the remnants of the Takelma, they can eventually track down Hourglass Johnson, the tribal spokesman. She can tell him that the Great Bat was never the god of the Takelma, but just one of the many nature spirits that they worshipped, and will mention that her great-grandmother, Shasta Walker, who is 90 years old, who is still alive and lives with Hourglass, grew up with the ancient survivors of the Rogue River Wars, and once mentioned that she heard that their leaders went into a deep cave to gain strength from the Great Bat, though she has no idea where this is or even if there is any truth in the matter. After this, we go into investigating the church. It is contained in a compound of around 300 acres in the wooded hills around 10 kilometres northeast. The land has cattle, horses and a printing plant, as well as a warehouse. There are a dozen houses, and the church itself, which, although not what you might call beautiful, is solidly constructed from stone and wood. The church has a well-made website, which has videos and podcasts of the host's sermons. Anyone who pays particular attention to the altars on the website will notice that they are engraved with 12 names. Joseph Adams, Makepeace Cotton, Goodman Griswold, Increase Hartwell, Nicholas Heaton, Ephraim Hicks, Hezekiah Hind, Uzziah Joyner, John Pemble, Giles Root, Silence Root, and Samuel Woodman. If local records are checked, the name Giles Root can be attributed to an employee of El Salzo in 1948, just before Salzo shut down the company and established the church. There are no records at all on Giles Root, birth, death or otherwise. The other names can easily be attributed to matching those of early Puritans from New England. If a more in-depth search is attempted, the names of Increase Hartwell and Samuel Woodman can be found in a scanned page of a book entitled Witch Trials of the Miskatonic, an account of 17th century witchcraft scares from northeast Massachusetts focusing on Arkham. A witch named Vanity Non-Tyler named Hartwell and Woodman as members of the Sons of Serenos, a cult of warlocks. This is all they can discover about them, though it turns out that Tyler was burned at the stake where it seems at first the fire would not burn her, but that the good people prayed to God and she shrieked and vanished. If the Sons of Serenos are researched, they can find a few small mentions on Wikipedia tying them to a rumoured New England cult of warlocks inspired by the Rosicrucians. If Witch Trials of Miskatonic are researched, physical copies can be found in Miskatonic University in Arkham and the Library of Congress, though they cannot be obtained via an interlibrary loan. They are for on-site viewing only. If they go further and research it by visiting the libraries, they can discover the full list of the Sons of Serenos, which matches the names on the altar, though no record of any of them being tried can be found. Okay, so back to the church itself. It has 10 men, 13 women and 20 children, of which 15 are boys. Anyone who had a criminal record before moving in has stayed clean since. Around 80 regulars attend services bi-weekly but do not live there. The church makes money from selling books worldwide, donations and people paying for weekend visits. They also make money from their top quality ranch and are squeaky clean as far as tax goes. The church believes that God is served through the intercession of the 12 martyrs and that a servant's heart is an expression of Christian love. The church leader is Errol Salzo III, known as the host, as he incarnates an ancient enlightened spirit who constantly returns to guide them in worship of God, the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ. It is considered part of the Sabaoth that serves the throne of God. It's noted that the 12 martyrs do not reincarnate, though their heavenly spirits share their wisdom with the host. Sermons are performed daily at noon and are recorded and live streamed a few times a week. High Holy Prayers are held at midnight between Saturday and Sunday and is only for those that reside in the compound, where the host reads from his personal private Bible. This is not live streamed or recorded. If agents get in touch with a county social worker, they will mention that the church is very insular and is the type of place that raises suspicions, but it is entirely legal. The condition of the women in the church is distressing, but social workers are not allowed to investigate simple misery. If birth records are inquired about, they can discover that around 75% of births are male since 1995, which is unusual. Medical records will not be shared about patients, and any digging or stealing of records will result in nothing of significance. The Hourglass library can yield some important information. The librarian, Magdalena Munch, will mention that documents pertaining to the church often go missing, though she has hidden away a few. By far the most important document is an audio recording of the High Holy Prayer sermon. The librarian is unaware of its existence, and it can only be found if the agents commit to searching the library for a few days. It's an audio CD in a paper envelope marked C.12 Martyrs High H. Prayers that is in a local interest collection that has not been sorted out. The file was created on Monday the 14th of September 1992. The speaker is reading from a sacred text which can be recognised with the right roles as a passage from Thessalonians. The speaker does not sound like Errol Salzo III, but those with good humour can determine, if compared to a recording of Salzo now, that whoever it is seems to be doing a remarkable impression of the speaker from 1992. Around 23 minutes in, the person delivering the sermon will start speaking in tongues, though those with a high enough unnatural skill will recognise the name Shub-Nugurath being mentioned. The sermon reaches a crescendo at around 31 minutes and reverts back to English with the line, "Show us the inner temple, holiest of the holies, let the sacred ark of the Sabaoth reveal its glory," and then it will go suddenly silent. For an hour. Anyone with the right skills can note that the room sounds are still there, but there's no breathing, shuffling or coughing at all. Suddenly, at 93 minutes, the audience sounds return at once with weeping and shouting, with some thanking the Lord for showing the glories of heaven. Some people bellow as if they've been driven insane. And then the recording stops. The families of those who are counted amongst the faithful are extremely unwilling to talk in any official capacity, and those with a degree of human skill can tell that they are scared. They can't really articulate as to why, just that they feel uneasy. There are no former residents of the church. Anyone who left died in a number of accidental deaths such as overdoses, disease, domestic abuse, and other crimes which cannot in any way be connected to the church. It then moves on to the compound itself. We have a map of the land owned by the church with all the important places marked, and then it goes on to discuss the different important sections. It is sprawling, green and pleasant, with a large portion dedicated to farming. The woods around the property has extraordinarily rich soil, so much so that if it is examined, it will be unexplainable. At night time, they bustle with life and there is a strange unnerving smell in the air, something oily and almost fleshy. If the church becomes aware of the agents and they subsequently search the woods, they will find clusters of stickmen figures hanging from the trees, with there being a number in the cluster equal to the number of agents. All of the buildings have security cameras if they have electricity, and their water well and pump has a silent alarm. There are no fences other than those meant for cattle around the compound. It gives us a map of the sanctuary, more on that in a bit, and then it talks about the church services, giving the times that they occur. If the agents somehow manage to rig video up at the time of High Holy Prayers, then they will see the entire congregation vanish, then reappear. Tours of the compound can be arranged on a horse-drawn wagon, with Robert Santos being the guide, and they can actually meet the host for a few minutes. If they want to join the church, they will be encouraged and welcomed to the noon services. After a year or two, they may get invited to live in the compound, though this is obviously an unlikely course for agents. It then goes on to talk about the faithful. Every man, woman and child there is fascinated by the host and adore him and are terrified of him in equal measure, with only agents investigating them being more scary. There are a few girls there, but most of these are the host's own daughters, which he will occasionally take as a wife. They will avoid all strangers and only talk if approached with a huge degree of care and consideration. They can tell the agents about their faith and can tell them that the spirits of the 12 martyrs reside in sacred arks, with there being many that hold each martyr, explaining that they are candles that were crafted with their remains. Disturbingly, they will mention that during High Holy Prayers, they emerge from the ark speaking to the men of the church. If they're asked about Terry Santos, they will say that she had to lose her baby, but will flee if asked why. Next, it talks about the inner temple. It's only used during high holy prayers and is not an actual geographical place. The faithful can't or won't recall anything about the inner temple or what goes on there. If pushed, they will only remember a mixture of joy, weeping, prayer and sparks in the air. If they're interviewed using psychotherapy, witnesses will recall high holy prayers being violent and sexual, being led by young men who became possessed by the martyrs, though interviews of this type will probably attract suspicion and have them removed from the compound. It then goes into Ria Salzo, the 73-year-old mother of Errol Salzo III. She looks after all the church business and finances, is secretary to the host and the leader of the women of the compound. A lifetime survivor of manipulative abuse, she truly believes in the sanctity of the host as one of its most faithful servants. She keeps detailed notes in her office that will be shredded at the first hint of investigation. If the agents somehow get to search her office, they can find notes that reveal a lot of information. They can find out that Ria controlled Terry's recruitment and kept her under control, and that she also pressured her to marry Robert Santos in law and the host in flesh. A few months after her wedding, she fell pregnant, and Ria helped Terry perform a DNA test at 10 weeks, which yielded the result that she was carrying a girl. The host told Terry that God wanted her to deliver a boy, so Ria administered drugs that would cause Terry to miscarry, and further information kept at the church will show that there had been many miscarriages there, all girls. If her home is searched, the trunk of miscarriage drugs will be found in the attic along with a list of suppliers. Next, we get to the sanctuary. This is a single large building with a church room with pews and an altar, with all of the rooms shown on the map earlier. The sacred ark of the Sabaoth sits on the altar here. It looks like a meteorite the size of a bowling ball. Examining it can cause sand loss with varying effects depending on how much is lost. Underneath the meteorite is a lid in the top of the altar which contains a key to open up the secret sacristy. More on that in a bit. It'll remain inert if touched or picked up, and even staying in that state if smashed to pieces. If the host is hurt, it will come alive, transforming into the horror that is Silent's root. After this, we move on to the host himself, Errol Salzo III. Errol Salzo III is a good-looking, friendly 50-year-old white man who seems earnest and honest. He has eloquent speech and his sermons are popular. His aim is to keep the agents at bay by making the church seem harmless, and even if he finds them snooping about, he will invite them to join him for coffee, offering to answer any queries to the best of his ability. If they indicate to him that they know something he deems they shouldn't, he will try to get them to talk about what they heard that bothered them, seeming alarmed and wanting to make things right. Those with a good humour can see right through his lies, however. He will deny the boy-only policy in the compound and sleeping with the women and talk about it as misconstrued gossip. Those who start talking about the occult or the unnatural pique his interest, with those of low skill being told by him to not mess with things that they don't understand, and those with above 10% in unnatural causing him to drop all pretense and demanding to know what they want and the like. If he thinks that they have unnatural protection, he tells them to leave or die. If he thinks they don't, he will excuse himself and then send in his followers to assault and capture them for interrogation in the inner temple. Similarly, if the agents attack, he will drop the act and become vicious and arrogant. It's worth noting that 2 other martyrs possessed 2 of the host's descendants. Nicholas Heaton is in Andy Welks and Samuel Woodman is in 12-year-old Jake Elliott. They're gloating and arrogant when given the opportunity. The rest of the martyrs are in large candles in the secret sacristy. They are lit for an hour at a time and are happy to stay inert and have small bursts of cruel entertainment. The secret sacristy itself is a concealed walk-in closet in the host's office that leads to a locked trapdoor that could withstand a tornado. This contains the host's private Bible and the candles of the other martyrs. At the other end of the sacristy is an iron door that leads gradually downward, eventually to the inner temple, the Vault of the Bat. If the agents are captured at any point, they are bound, blindfolded and held in the worship hall. At midnight, the host, Jake Elliott, Andy Welks and Silent's Root light the martyrs' candles and conduct a shortened version of the High Holy Prayers ceremony, casting the Whispers of the Dead spell, which brings them to the inner temple where they are psychically assaulted by one of the martyrs who will try to exchange personalities with them. If they're successful, they utter praises to Shub-Niggurath and the Shoggoths of the Deeps, and that agent is released to join their colleagues. The inner temple itself is reached using the previously mentioned ritual. To those within the sanctuary, the chamber appears to reshape itself with a keening psychic noise, vanishing and giving way to the Vault of the Bat. If viewed by outsiders, the congregation rises to an ecstasy of prayer and worship and then vanishes along with the Ark of the Sabaoth. Inside the inner temple, the host is with the congregants and the Ark rests on a rough stone altar on the edge of a gaping pit that emits strange whispers and howls from the depths. It's dimly lit by the martyrs' candles and glowing green fungus, and the walls are covered in ancient carvings that show a giant bat looming over dancing figures that can be recognised by Native American by those in the know. Here, the martyrs leave the candles and possess the congregation for an hour to enjoy sadistic pleasures. If the agents intrude upon this ceremony, the host will call forth the martyrs to begin possessing the men of the church and attacking the agents with the withering spell, though they lack any sort of coordination. It then goes into what happens should the agents draw the attention of the church. Jake Elliott begins stalking them and singles out the one who he considers the most vulnerable and casts exchange personalities on them, casting obscure memory on them to create a blank space where the possession was. If the spell fails, then the agent's mind will transfer to Jake Elliott's body for an hour. Welk, who accompanies Elliott when they try this, will know the agent is in the body if they start asking questions and make sure the truck that they are in is locked so that they can't escape. Welk is essentially unbendable in his convictions and will rebut all attempts by the trapped agent to be brought on side. Woodman in the agent's body can do real harm in the single hour he has. He will memorise personal details and possessions, names, numbers and messages, and then turn them over to the church and their allies in order for them to go after not only the agent but also their bonds. He will get updates from the other agents and can only be detected with a good human role or asking questions that only the agent would know. If he is restrained, he will simply return to the body of Jake Elliott. The next section is called Backlash. With the church being around for as long as it has, they have built strong connections in order to protect from outsiders. If they realise they are being investigated, they will go to the Departments of Justice and the FBI, even if the agents have perfect cover for their work. They will start legal proceedings, get in touch with the agent's bonds if that information has been discovered, and if they find out that false identities are being used, they will inform the FBI. The community leaders in Hourglass will contact their congressional representatives, the Department of Justice and the FBI too, and this has the potential to spiral out of all control and expose the agents should it get to this level. Should it be discovered that the FBI are looking into the Terry Santos disappearance, a local news team from Eugene, Oregon will turn up and spend an afternoon interviewing the police, who will say it's a hoax. They will track down an eyewitness who says she ran off and even go after the agents themselves. Depending on how the agents react to this, they may even stick around. The police department has a group of officers who are corrupt and essentially untouchable, with the honest cops pretending they don't see what's going on, as exposing it would be a breach of trust between officers. There are 5 of them, and they are connected to the church due to bribery and extortion from meth dealers in the area. They will go to huge lengths to cover up crimes by the church, and they can be spotted keeping tabs on witnesses to the Santos disappearance. Once they are aware of the agents, they start following them round in unmarked cars and patrol SUVs day and night. They'll bug the agents' rooms and put GPS trackers in their vehicles. Should they discover that the agents are about to raid the church compound, they strike preemptively. To do this, they convince a meth-producing family that the agents are a rival mob who've come to kill them and steal their business, and this gang, high on PCP and crystal meth, will perform a clumsy attack on the agents in their rooms. When they attack, 2 of the officers wait nearby listening for gunshots. After 2 rounds, they'll call for backup and will attempt to go in guns blazing, killing agents and meth gang alike. If this is not possible, they will arrest the meth family, which could launch a huge investigation by Hourglass detectives into the attack, the meth family, the agents, and the whole crime scene, which could expose the agents further. In the instance that the agents manage to disarm and arrest the meth family, this could also backfire catastrophically. If they contact their handler about doing this, they will receive a resounding no, as this will draw unwanted attention. Should this proceed, it has the potential to spiral even further out of control of the agents, with the District Attorney for Oregon and the Portland FBI getting involved. This could even result in the agents being surrounded by more agents in order to relieve them of their duties. We then move on to a section called Violence at the Compound. Should a fight break out, most of the women will hide with the children, while the men will rush to protect the host, barricading themselves in and calling the police and hoping news crews show up. Welks and Elliott will try to possess the agents and make them kill each other, or if possible, wither them. The police show up in around 15 minutes, set up a perimeter, kit out a SWAT team, a sniper, plus look out in a helicopter, and 4 tactical medics. The fire team will move in to arrest the agents, killing them if they don't comply. They enter the compound in an armoured MATV. The SWAT team may even be sent in by the FBI should the police department be under investigation. We then move on to the resolution of events. If everything becomes too open, the host, Silent, and the incarnate martyrs will flee with the Arks of the Martyrs and Salzo Bible to start anew somewhere else. The agents will receive Sam back if they seal off the Vault of the Bat permanently, destroy the Arks, or destroy Silence. The repercussions could be deep and long-reaching for the agents, with ramifications that embed themselves in their personal life. If Elliott and Welks are captured, then orders will be sent to terminate them, which, given that Elliott is in the body of a 12-year-old boy, is sad affecting. They could be exorcised from the bodies. The ritual is in the Salzo Bible, but both of them are so scarred by the ordeal that they are almost mentally at rock bottom and have cancerous Shoggoth growths on their body. It details the artifacts, rituals and tomes in the scenario, talking about the Arks of the Martyrs, the Deathless Flame ritual, and the Salzo Bible, which gives details on the Ark of the Sabaoth, excerpts from the Necronomicon, the history of the Sons of Serenos, and a whole host of spells. It also goes into researching Innsmouth and what they can discover in relation to the Esoteric Order of Dagon and the events of 1928. If the agents are part of the programme, details in Innsmouth will be solidly refused. If the outlaws are being used, the agents will receive information detailing some of the events that lead to information on another Delta Green scenario, Ex Oblivione. Lastly, we have details on all of the NPCs in the scenario, including the particularly fearsome Proto-Shoggoth, Silence Root, and the Meth family. Hourglass is a scenario that could, with the right group and pacing of play, take weeks and perhaps months to complete. The Church of the 12 Martyrs have burrowed so deeply into society in order to prevent the discovery of their foul deeds and protect their perceived innocence that, as mentioned previously, events have the potential to spiral far out of control of not only the agent but Delta Green itself. The Church excellently realised, with the host being portrayed in a way that may seem familiar to those who have seen the often disingenuous performances that televangelists regularly take part in, and his over-sincerity and kindness is going to be an immediate red flag to those who encounter him. The martyrs themselves are wonderfully cruel and uncaring, and the idea that they would possess the bodies of children in order to further extend their unnatural existence tweaks cleverly upon the morals of the vast majority of people due to it being such an unthinkable thing to do. I do feel like some of the vital information is a bit too difficult to dig up. For example, ask yourself how many groups would assign themselves to a library for a few days in order to find clues. Also, getting hold of things like Salzo's Bible is nigh on impossible without alerting anyone, and could potentially take a long time in planning, observation and execution to pull off, should they even become aware of its existence in the first place. The Church as an entity seems to be incredibly tough, resilient, well-informed and connected, and Silence Root is really the ace up their sleeve due to him or even it being so powerful and obedient. I think the players and keepers tackling Delta Green for the first time could possibly struggle with this scenario, as there are a lot of moving parts that need to be all kept in sync in order to not only keep events flowing, but to also allow any potential repercussions to be fully developed to completion. The addition of the family of meth dealers, cleverly named the Meth Family Robinson, could throw a spanner in the works, and an agent that becomes possessed by one of the incarnate martyrs could cause catastrophic damage not only to their group but also their bonds that are unaware of the existence of Delta Green and what it does. The book itself has good art throughout, though the maps feel a bit compressed onto the page, and although it stands at 30 pages in length, you do get a fair bit of game for your money. I feel it could have done with more information on things like Hourglass itself, the Cave of the Bat, and the Tekelma people, but as it stands, it presents a very capable opponent for the agents to investigate. I did have a few minor issues with the scenario though. Firstly, unlike almost every other Delta Green scenario, there is no scene pitched about arriving in Hourglass. The agents essentially just appear there after the initial briefing, and another issue, more possibly focused on non-American players, is how the justice system and interagency chain of command works. It goes into how the Departments of Justice are informed, as well as the FBI and House Representatives, but I personally have no idea what that involves in real terms without having to go away and research it. The Church of the 12 Martyrs have the potential to be a thorn in the side of the agents and Delta Green beyond the realm of this scenario due to their influence and wealth, and also the fact that they've existed far beyond their normal mortal age is a testament to their canniness, ability to look to the future and play the long game. The Church should not be caught off guard easily by the agents, and this is backed up by the connections they have made and the way they are set up. As previously said, I think that beginners should probably save Hourglass until they've played through a few operations and have become used to how things are done, as what lies ahead is both rich in scope and intrigue. I give Hourglass an 8 out of 10. Okay, that concludes part 6 of Black Sites. Part 7 in this series will be Ex Oblivione.